A killer clown, a makeshift graveyard, and a suburban nightmare. All that and more on this week's ancient journey, Killer Clown. But before we begin, don't forget, if you enjoy our content, hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe. Now let's get started. In 1942, John Stanley and Marion Gacy welcome a son into the world. John Stanley Gacy names his son after the most peak masculine icon he can think of, Western actor John Wayne. And so little John Wayne Gacy is welcomed into the world, joining his upper middle class family in Chicago. John Stanley named John Wayne Gacy after an on-screen tough guy, but he quickly realizes that John Wayne Gacy is not the boy he dreamed of raising. John Stanley and wife Marion will welcome two other children into the world, daughters Joanne and Karen. But John Wayne Gacy disappoints his father from a very early age. One of John Wayne Gacy's earliest memories is being beaten with a leather belt for moving car components that his father had laid out to work on. John Stanley would call John Wayne dumb or stupid, and would often compare him unfavorably to his sisters. Marion Gacy would try to shield her son from the alcoholic rages of his father, and her protection only makes John Stanley despise his son even more. He would call John Wayne a sissy and a mama's boy, telling him he would probably grow up to enjoy the company of other men. John Wayne Gacy would sometimes be caught wearing his mother's underwear and literally depended on her for every bit of nurturing he ever received. And despite this, John Wayne Gacy still loved his father very deeply. But it didn't take much for John Wayne Gacy to be beaten by his father, often just a few too many drinks or perhaps just a bad day. But when John Wayne Gacy actually did do something wrong, then all hell would really break loose. At the age of 7, John Wayne Gacy and a friend were accused of touching a young girl in the neighborhood. John Stanley grabs a razor strop, the thick leather strap used by barbers to sharpen a razor, and beats his son severely. And right around this time, John Wayne Gacy would fall victim to abuse himself. A family friend would begin to molest him, and John Wayne Gacy was left with a choice: tell his parents and hope they would make the abuse end, or keep quiet about it to keep the peace. Gacy decides to find a middle ground to keep everyone happy. He worries he'll be blamed for the interaction and be beaten severely once again if he doesn't. So he only tells his father he no longer wishes to spend time with the family friend, and the abuse stops. Gacy would later claim that he had also been abused at an even younger age by a 15-year-old girl in the neighborhood. As John Wayne grew, he continued to disappoint his father. He developed into an overweight and unathletic child, not the man that John Stanley had hoped for. John Wayne Gacy was diagnosed with a heart condition and told to avoid all sports in school, something that his father looked on as laziness. In the 4th grade, Gacy's heart condition would cause him to begin having blackouts. He would be in and out of the hospital from these incidents, and in 1957, he would be hospitalized for a burst appendix. Gacy's medical issues were real, but his father would suspect that they were just another way for him to get out of any real work and gain the sympathies of his mother. As Gacy lays in a hospital bed, his father stands over him and openly tells him that he suspects that he's faking it. John Wayne Gacy is ostracized and isolated at home and now in school as well. His mother offers his only protection and his only loving touch. John is loathed by his father and misses so much school he doesn't develop any real relationships there. And in addition, when he is there, he is unable to participate in any games or sports with other boys his age. The rest of his family and friends do not doubt his illnesses are real, but no medical diagnosis is given to explain what's wrong with him. But they all continue to witness John Stanley's abuse. John Stanley Gacy emerges from the basement one day and beats John Wayne in front of a classmate. Marion, who was always there to protect John Wayne, attempts to intervene. John Wayne's classmate remembers that John never once attempted to fight back against his father. "I never swung at my dad," Gacy said. "I never swung at him because I loved him for what he stood for." The beatings and the humiliations often took place in the basement of the home, and John Stanley would beat his wife Marion, as well as his two daughters as well. John Wayne Gacy was all thumbs, helping with home improvement projects, resulting in more beatings and more criticism. But Gacy's sister would later say that they all learned to be tough while facing the beatings from their father, and that John Wayne Gacy would never, ever cry. While John Wayne would not show emotion on the outside, he was suffering greatly on the inside, not only from the isolation he experienced in his life, but also from the realization that something about him would disappoint his father most of all. John Wayne Gacy was struggling with the fact that he was gay. Marion Gacy knew that had John Stanley found out, he would have killed her son. So John Wayne Gacy's secret remained just that for now. John Wayne Gacy soon grew up, moving on from the beaten, isolated boy and turning into a man. And finally, for the first time in his life, Gacy grew into something more, someone of importance. At the age of 18, despite not graduating from his high school, Gacy becomes involved in local politics, working as an assistant precinct captain in his neighborhood for the Democrat Party. The position makes Gacy the direct contact or link between voters in the neighborhood and the Democratic Party officials. While Gacy's pleased at the approval he receives from the voters in the neighborhood, the one person who he still cannot please is his father. John Stanley Gacy calls his son a patsy, someone who is easily taken advantage of. And Gacy's father would add another layer of control and shame to John Wayne in the form of a car. John Stanley Gacy would purchase his son a car, but was sure to keep the title in his own name. The car became a method of controlling John Wayne Gacy, and if he didn't live up to his father's expectations, the keys to the car would be taken away. John Wayne Gacy was smart enough to have a duplicate set of keys made, but when the elder Gacy discovered this, he removed an electrical component in the car so it would not run. John Stanley Gacy would keep this part and leave John Wayne without a car for 3 days. John Wayne Gacy, now embarrassed and unsuccessful in gaining his father's acceptance, would leave home after the part was returned to the car. Gacy leaves home and drives to Las Vegas. Once there, Gacy finds work with a local ambulance service, and eventually he's transferred to work as an attendant in the local morgue. Gacy would sleep on a cot directly behind the room where bodies would be embalmed. Gacy would work there for 3 months until one night he finds himself in a coffin next to a deceased teenaged male. He finds himself embracing the body and caressing it. he experiences a sudden shock at his actions and decides the only way to fix things is to return home. He calls his mother, and she gets his father to agree to let him return home. Once home, Gacy enrolls at a small business college. Northwestern Business College offers training and certificates, and it enables Gacy to take a management trainee position with the Nunn-Bush Shoe Company. The company soon transfers him to Springfield, Illinois, to work as a salesman, and soon he becomes the manager of his own department. Gacy now has a career and soon will also have a fiancée. Gacy gets engaged to co-worker Marilyn Myers in 1964. Gacy also begins to work feverishly for the local JC's Club. It's an organization that helps with leadership training and civic matters for young men so that they can be better leaders to others. Gacy climbs the rank of the local JCs. One night, one of the other male JCs would feed him alcohol and would end up taking advantage of him. Even as things all seemed to be going in the right direction for John Wayne Gacy, there was always some horrible moment just around the corner. In 1965, John Wayne Gacy is named the third most outstanding JC in the state of Illinois. Despite being a gay man, Gacy and Marilyn would marry in September of 1964. Marilyn's parents were owners of 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. Gacy had hit the literal lottery. Gacy and his wife would move to Waterloo, Iowa, where Gacy would be named manager of the chicken restaurant chain. They would move into Marilyn's parents' home after they had moved out. Gacy would earn the equivalent of $130,000 per year in today's dollars, plus another share of the profits the franchises would make. And Gacy would become a father in 1966 and again in 1967. Gacy's father paid a visit in 1966, and when he sees the life that John Wayne Gacy has crafted for himself, his father pulls him aside and privately apologizes to him for the physical and emotional abuse he had inflicted on him. Gacy's father shakes his hand, looks him in the eye, and tells him, "Son, I was wrong about you." Gacy describes this period of his life as perfect. With a new wife, a new lucrative career, and a new house, Gacy could have lived the rest of his life happy and healthy and never looked back. But that basement of his father's in Chicago, it just kept calling to him. So Gacy would turn his own basement not into a place of suffering, but of fun. Gacy's basement would become a sort of club where his employees could come relax, drink, play pool. And once he had given some of the young men there several drinks, he would make sexual advances towards them. If they refused, Gacy would just pretend he was only joking. Gacy would also spend large amounts of time working for the JCs. He would provide chicken for JC events and was considered to be quite ambitious. Gacy was named outstanding vice president of the organization and would even serve on their board of directors. But just like Gacy, the JCs of Waterloo were hiding some secrets, namely that some of their members were involved in things that were not on the up and up. But it was as if Gacy couldn't sit still. He would again become involved in politics and would start a construction business as well. But deep down, Gacy was still living a lie. He was a tortured soul. His sexual appetite would be what finally gets him into serious trouble. In August of 1967, Gacy hires the son of a fellow JC member to do some housework for him. 15-year-old Donald Voorhees is lured into Gacy's basement. He's given alcohol and then assaulted by John Wayne Gacy. Voorhees would come forward about the incident in March of 1968. The boy's father would help initiate the investigation into John Wayne Gacy. The false kingdom that Gacy had created, the good job, the wife, the kids, the reputation, it would all soon be gone. Gacy would make a last-ditch effort to keep his name clean, paying $300 to one of his employees to beat up Donald Voorhees, hoping it would keep him from testifying. But Donald escapes the beating, and the incident just pours gasoline onto the fire. The investigation turns into criminal charges, and Gacy has no way to escape them. John Wayne Gacy pleads guilty to the offense, and he's sentenced to 10 years in prison. He has promptly served divorce papers from his wife Marilyn and would never see her again. But just as Gacy couldn't sit still in Waterloo, he also couldn't sit still while in prison. Over the next 2 years, Gacy would end up securing a raise for prison kitchen employees. He would increase the membership of prisoners that were in the JCs to up to 600. He would oversee the installation of a mini golf course in the prison recreation yard. And Gacy would become something of an artist in prison as well, repeatedly sketching the image of a character he called Pogo the Clown. And in the same way that Gacy hid his sexuality on the outside, he did the same thing in prison, pretending that he was a straight man and that he despised gay people. Gacy is deemed a model prisoner, a role model for other inmates, and he's rewarded for it. John Wayne Gacy is released from prison after just 2 years and given 12 months probation. As part of his probation, he's forced to live at home with his mother, and he has to agree to a 10 p.m. curfew. John quickly agrees to the terms, declaring he will never go back to jail. Gacy is now free again, moving in with only his mother into Plain, Illinois. John Stanley Gacy has passed away in 1969. It takes just a few months for John Wayne Gacy to be in trouble once again. Even though he's at home with his mother and has a curfew, John Wayne Gacy lures a teenage boy into his home and he attacks him. Gacy is charged for the crime, but the case doesn't move forward because the boy fails to show up for the court case. In what is a horrible lack of oversight, the crime results in a parole violation, one that should have sent John Wayne Gacy directly back to prison. But Gacy's parole officer somehow is never made aware of the episode, and Gacy remains a free man. Gacy has once again not bothered to sit still. He's been operating a small construction business that continues to grow and grow. The business gets large enough that Gacy needs a larger space to house his business, so he finds a new, more spacious location for he and his mother. In 1971, Gacy would take up residence in northwestern Chicago. 8213 West Summerdale Avenue would become Gacy's home and would become an address that would live on in infamy. Gacy would soon become sort of a local celebrity after moving into the neighborhood. He would turn himself into Pogo the Clown. Gacy would join a local entertainers club called the Jolly Jokers and put on shows as Pogo the Clown in local hospitals and birthday parties. Gacy would perform as Pogo at Democratic Party events as well, and residents of the neighborhood recalled the strange sight of Gacy dressed in full clown regalia, showing up to the local bar, the Good Luck Lounge. What a strange sight it must have been to see the sad, drunk clown face down at the bar. In the meantime, Gacy's business, PDM Contractors, which stood for Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance, is doing quite well. Just as he did in his chicken restaurant days, Gacy hires mainly young men as his employees. He's once again built a series of lies that are around him, protecting and presenting a certain image. Gacy appears from the outside to be harmless. He's the hard-working business owner who entertains as a clown at children's birthday parties. He's the guy who helped you shovel your driveway or get your car out of the ditch and tell you why you should vote Democrat in the next election. And Gacy would also remarry again to add another layer of lie to his persona. A high school friend, Carol Hoff, and he were married in 1972. But for the next 3 years, Carol Hoff would see enough about Gacy in private that she eventually would question his sexuality. In 1975, Gacy would admit to Hoff that he was bisexual, causing her to divorce him and leave their home. One of the things Hoff notices that prompts her to question him: John Wayne Gacy continues to bring teenaged boys home and spend long hours in their garage with them. What Goff didn't see, however, was that Gacy would become most famous for. The very year that the two were married, John Wayne Gacy committed his first murder. Gacy kills young Timothy McCoy. The teenage McCoy is passing through the Chicago area when he meets Gacy. Gacy would stab him to death and hide his body under the crawl space of the house. It's Gacy's first murder. Gacy kills a second victim in 1974. That person is still unidentified, but Gacy admits to strangling him and hiding him in his closet, eventually also moving him to the crawl space of the house. Gacy has built up a solid reputation in the neighborhood, despite his wife leaving him. He has the perfect cover for his behavior. He's already gotten away with 2 murders, and the floodgates are now open. Gacy would continue to bring victims to his home, all young men or boys. He would often prey on runaways, drifters, or the homeless, people who were less likely to be missed. With the exception of a few victims, Gacy would drag each body to his crawl space. The same persona he had built around town was an authority figure. Gacy would often impersonate a policeman. He was a business owner, so Gacy could often offer them a job. Gacy would then offer drugs or booze, and then the torture would begin. Gacy would handcuff some victims. He strangled many. He would drown a few. He stabbed many. He assaulted every one of them in the event that a young boy he murdered had a family, and they would begin a search for him. Gacy would be right there with them, offering his help from his position of power in the neighborhood. Gacy was their friend, an upstanding, solid citizen of the community, above reproach. But eventually, Gacy's house of lies would come crashing down once again. It's 1978, and John Wayne Gacy has murdered 32 people so far. Robert Peast is a high school sophomore working at a local drugstore. Robert's mother is there to pick him up at the end of his shift at around 9 p.m. Robert tells her to wait just a few minutes. He's got a customer outside he says had a summer contracting job that would pay him much more than he was making at the drugstore. Robert told his mother he would be just a few minutes. Elizabeth Peast waits and waits, but she will never see Robert again. He is John Wayne Gacy's 33rd victim. Elizabeth files a missing persons report just before midnight. Police immediately spring into action. The man that Robert was speaking to was John Wayne Gacy, whose PDM contracting business had just remodeled the pharmacy where Peast was working. Perhaps due to Gacy's standing in the community, the police only ask him to come in for questioning instead of dragging him in. Gacy agrees but stops to dump Peace's body into the Des Plaines River on the way into the station. Within hours of questioning him, they search the Gacy home. They find no body, but they do find a receipt that Peace was in possession of. They also find a treasure trove of very strange evidence. Fake police badges, fake handguns, syringes and hypodermic needles, handcuffs, bottles of Valium, amyl nitrate, several driver's licenses, a Maine West High School class ring, and articles of clothing that were in sizes too small to fit John Wayne Gacy. The police confiscate Gacy's car and work vehicles and begin aggressive surveillance of the Gacy residence. During this time, the investigators begin to learn about some of Gacy's behavior from previous victims who managed to survive. They hear that Gacy has previously lured people to his home and left them battered and assaulted. They learn that the Maine West High School class ring is traced to missing man John Allen Sick. They learn from Sick's mother that in addition to his ring being missing, a Motorola TV set is also missing from his apartment. Gacy rents a car to use and now is trying to use his charms on the police who are following him. He invites them for meals at restaurants or drinks at bars and continues to deny to them that he is guilty of anything. He accuses them of simply harassing him only due to his politics. Gacy invites two detectives to a restaurant the morning of December 18th. The two detectives agree, and Gacy lays the charm on them as heavy as he can. He tells them of his marriages and his activity dressing as a clown, and at one point tells them, clowns can get away with murder. By the next day, police have compiled evidence for a second search warrant for Gacy's home. Gacy still can't help himself and actually invites the police officers into his home. Officers Robinson and Schultz walk into Gacy's home with a plan. While Robinson is going to chat up Gacy, Schultz will attempt to see if the Motorola TV that Gacy has is the same one that is missing from Allen Sick's apartment. Schultz uses the excuse that he needs to use the bathroom and goes to check on the television set. In order to cover the story that he needed to use the bathroom and not arouse the suspicion of Gacy, Schultz goes and flushes the toilet. And when he does, the smell of rotting flesh rises from a heating duct in the bathroom. On the night of December 20th, Gacy drives to his lawyer's office. He walks into the lawyer's office looking disheveled, asks for a drink, and then tells his lawyer his entire sordid tale. He gives a long, rambling confession, telling his attorneys that he has been judge, jury, and executioner of many people, and that now he wanted to be the same for himself. He tells them that he's buried most of his victims in his crawlspace and has disposed of some in the river. He describes his victims as male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars. And oddly, Gacy nods off in the middle of his confession. His attorneys begin to make arrangements to get Gacy in for psychiatric treatment first thing in the morning. But Gacy awakens a few hours later. When his attorney tells him he has just confessed to some 30 murders, Gacy tells them, "Well, I can't think about this right now. I've got things to do." And shockingly, Gacy leaves his lawyer's office to take care of some business matters. Gacy plans to spend his final day of freedom visiting friends and family, but he's still being followed by those police officers while driving around in his rental car. Gacy pulls into a gas station and hands the attendant working there a small bag of marijuana. He tells the attendant that the police officers following him are about to kill him, Gacy speeds off, and the attendant immediately hands the bag of marijuana to the police officers. Gacy is observed holding a rosary to his chin as he drives, praying as he moves along. Police finally arrest Gacy on the charge of possessing and distributing the marijuana to the gas station attendant. They tell Gacy that they're about to search his crawl space. He tells them that there's a young man buried under his garage that he's killed in self-defense. When police begin to search the crawl space, they find that Gacy has unplugged a drain pump to it, which has allowed it to flood. They reconnect the sump pump and drain the 28 by 38 foot area, and evidence technician Daniel Gentry enters and begins digging. Within minutes, he has discovered human remains, then another set, and then another. Gacy is arrested. He provides a formal statement to police that he has murdered approximately 30 young men. Some victims he knows by name, others Gacy does not know well at all. Gacy tells police that he had plans just a few months from now to pour a thick layer of concrete in the crawl space. Had he done so, it's possible he never would have been found out. Gacy goes to trial on February 6, 1980. He's tried before Judge Louis Garippo. Gacy is found guilty by a jury, and his execution date is eventually set for June 2nd of 1980. While in prison, Gacy begins painting again. Many of these paintings are later displayed at exhibitions or sold at auctions. Gacy's paintings are of a wide range of suspects: birds, skulls, his house, John Dillinger, clowns, dwarves, even Jesus Christ. Gacy is finally set to be executed on May 9th, 1994. For his last meal, he orders Kentucky Fried Chicken, fried shrimp, French fries, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. Gacy makes a final statement to his lawyer that killing him would not compensate the loss of his victims. He offers no remorse for his crimes. His final spoken words before execution are "kiss my ass." Gacy's death is confirmed at 12:58 a.m. on May 10, 1994. His brain is removed to be studied. His body is cremated. Only 28 of Gacy's victims have ever been identified. FBI profiler Robert Ressler believed that Gacy may have killed more victims in other states. In an interview, Gacy tells Ressler that 2 or 3 of his PDM contractors' employees had assisted in several of the murders. No one else is ever charged in any of these crimes. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.